Welcome to the RSP cast, film and film. Film and film, yes. Film and film sounds pretty darn good, actually. And joining me is Jordan Vanek with the 33rd team. And Jordan, it's we got a chance to chop it up um, with our man Mr. Brown you know over at Football Guys around the draft, and I just had so much fun talking ball with you that I was hoping that I could get you on for this. So instead of film and data today or film and theory, we're doing film and film, and we're going to talk about what we've seen in the NFL thus far. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I know we had love for Anthony Richardson in the same form. It's cool to see kind of his development so far this year, where you can see he's processing. And again, that escapability and avoiding sacks is very special.
Yeah, without a doubt, and I think we'll come back on and we'll get a. I think in a couple years we'll be talking about him on a very different level. But let's start off. Let's start off with the Dolphins ground game because and you brought up something, from some, talking about some of your DFS wins in the past about, how you do it because you're very much a film oriented guy, whereas a lot of DFS people are more about the numbers and so, it's funny because I was sharing, I don't play much DFS, and where I did, I've had success, but it was mostly from watching film. And then just from a time element, it was like, am I going to scout players for a living, or am I gonna quit that? Because if I'm doing what I'm doing, and I love it. But tell me about a little bit about your history with like identifying the Dolphins ground game, and then what your thoughts are with how it's evolved in 2023.
So it all starts with Mike McDaniel. I mean, he's just a mad scientist. Obviously, he's someone that comes from that Kyle Shanahan tree. And the one thing that I've always loved from Mike Shanahan, was they get their best players the ball. And Mike McDaniel, from all that he said, he's an outside the box thinker. I remember last year watching Tua hand the ball off like backwards. It's kind of like, well, why? Well, it kind of hides the ball for a good second. Why do we have to hand it off forwards? Like, he just does things that kind of get you thinking. Like this past weekend, Tyreek Hill lined up at tight end. So, and then he jet motions out, and the linebackers have no idea what to do because their coverage rules and assignments are broken. So, their ground game right now is special because it looks like everybody enjoys what they're doing, and their offensive line is playing unbelievable. They added Isaiah Wynn. He's been phenomenal like this start of the year, and he's been everything they've needed for that pulling type guard, a guy that's just, going to be able to demolish people. And then they also like did a fun experiment last year where Connor Williams is playing center. Connor Williams has played left tackle. He's played, I believe, right tackle at Texas. He's played guard. He's now playing center. So he understands what everybody's assignment is. And then on top of it, he's a very athletic dude that can kind of do what Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel did in San Fran when they had the center, or Mac from the Falcons,
Yeah.
where the pulling stuff and just kind of being chaotic in the run game. And then this past weekend, speed. There's no angle linebackers can get to right now because Chan and Raheem Mostert, they're just crushing those angles. Like, in Mike McDaniel also is very adaptive in the run game and has multiple inside zones, outside zone. He's normally an outside zone guy, but you saw in the New England game just last week or 2 weeks ago, where Bill Belichick, his guys, and the way that he formulates things, he crushes outside zone. So Mike McDaniel's like, okay, I'm going to run inside zone on you. Next thing you know, Raheem Mostert breaks a 60-yard touchdown because they can't hit the angle, and he's just one of the more explosive players in the league right now. Even at his age, it doesn't really matter. He hasn't taken a ton of touches, and when he's on the field, he's extremely explosive. So overall, you can see a team that's playing together. There's a lot of different pieces in different places, and when you have to focus on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and these jet motions, it's just breaking these linebackers and corners coverage assignments, and they're all focused on that instead of the run game.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the end result looks like what they've achieved are punt return lanes as opposed to rushing lanes. I
Yep.
mean, that's the best way I try to describe it to people, is that, like, just in the way that Arthur Smith used Cordero Patterson and said, hey, I saw what Bill Belichick was doing with him using toss. And that seems to be a good thing. What if we continue to build our offense around that toss play or on gap plays where we can get him to the edge, and now it's just a punt return where he might have been the greatest punt returner I've ever seen on tape in terms of like scouting a player. He was one of the best open field runners I ever saw, and he had that great success. And now you take a look at that motion with Mike McDaniel, and like one of the plays that I remember, like two plays that were memorable for me. One was a 20-yard run by Achan where Tyreek Hill is in that wing, on that wing as a tight end, and that late motion, it was against a soft edge of the safety and corner, so they're playing off and high, and one of them was tight over Hill, but as soon as Hill went that direction, I think he was a linebacker actually. He widened out, and once that happened, him and the safety widened out. You had this massive gap once the pullers came, and it was like if you're, it was just like that was if you were like Chris Brooks, who had 66 yards in that game, and I'm a big fan of his game, but like he's he's a dump truck compared to like these ninja motorcycles that are accelerating through there. And you're still going to gain, like a big guy like that, still going to gain 15 yards, probably maybe 20, because you're going to break tackles on top of it. But like, tell me a little bit more about like what are some of the run rules that get broken for like a linebacker when like there's that late motion that stretches out? Is it because they see that and they go, oh, that's man, and I've got to worry about I've got to worry about the wheel route or a bullet route, or is that what that is, or is it like something more? Is it, or are there other things too?
Well, the main thing is like they get them out of the running lanes they're supposed to be in. Like they get them out of the gaps that they're supposed to be filling. And when with Tyreek Hill, just in general, like if you don't if you don't come out on him, it's a speed race. You saw it in the first drive of the game.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill is wide open.
Yeah.
I don't know, like people obviously are coming around on Mike McDaniel because obviously what he's doing in Miami, like scoring 70 points in a football game, is just still mind-boggling to me. And he could have scored 73. He probably could have scored 100 if he really, really wanted to. But like right now, what they're doing, and I think there's also a credit to Vic Fangio of bringing him in and probably learning from him, because we saw last season who stopped him. It was Braden Staley. It was that Chargers team. They took away a lot of what this scheme does really, really well. And then you saw in week one, Mike McDaniel countered with, oh, I just have to avoid Asante Samuel Jr. That's fine. I'll figure out a way to do that. And like for these run game situations, I think obviously Vic Fangio creates the light box and he's able to kind of slow down a run game to some extent with that. But Mike McDaniel learning off of like him as someone who's been around the league for a long time and being able to pick his brain of a guy that actually, or system that actually stopped him, has just helped him take it to a whole new level. Right now, what they're doing with Hill is just pulling these linebackers out of their lanes. I mean, putting them at tight end, like your defense is assigned certain things. And when your defense is like, hey, your responsibility is the tight end.
And it's Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. The Chargers had the issue with it. They went into their 3-4 look when the Dolphins went 21 personnel. And there was a play where Khalil Mack, the outside linebacker, was responsible for Tyreek Hill in the slot. And Tua just looked to the side and was like, oh, this is perfect. Runs a little quick out, hits him. Tyreek Hill goes for like another 20 yards. And then there was another play where the Chargers said, okay, we're going to go nickel when they go 21 personnel. The Dolphins went 5 wide and put Ingold on one side of the field and Mostert on the other side of the field, and kept Smythe and Hill tight on one side stacked, and then Jalen Waddle in the slot. Chargers were in man, like 2-man, so their safeties are 20 yards deep because Tyreek Hill. There's the linebackers followed the fullback and the running back out wide, so that left nobody in the middle of the field. And now you're sitting here like your one corner is isolated with no help inside on Jalen Waddle, and then Tyreek Hill and Durham Smythe are stacked, and you're just praying that your corners don't break assignment. And I remember Tua just took the snap, hit Jalen Waddle on the slot or slant, and he goes 8 or 7 yards or 24 yards in that game. It's like they're just creating so many mismatches.
Yeah.
And once you give it the pass, the run game, the linebackers are terrified of the pass. They're on their back heels, and then the run game just gets going. And you saw it on this Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny the way you describe it. It's almost like if you got in a knife fight with someone who was wearing a suit of armor, and the
Yeah,
way that you did a technique, you literally pulled the suit of armor apart the
yeah,
way you described that play on either side, and now you're just exposing like their skin, and then
yeah,
your knives are on the inside. It's like okay, and it's crazy because and then you talked about the scouting against type. You can kind of see that they scout against type in the Broncos game. I mean, watching all the outside work, and then we're like, now they're deathly afraid of everything outside. Let's keep everything outside. Let's keep our players deep, and then they run a version of like where they run like I don't remember what the exact play is, but it's like
hmm
they toss it to H hand, but they have a lead fullback who's winding back. So it's literally like an inside play where it's like you got this wind back from the fullback, and the toss gives you the feeling that it's going to go outside. And because the fullback set and the running back are both catching, taking the toss to the left, and then the fullback goes to the inside, and then it's like, okay, now I just gashed you for 30 or 40 up the middle. And it's just like at that point, it's just like I give up, because they literally, like you said, he's scouting against him. He's getting to look at where are my weaknesses and let me play off those weaknesses. You
yep.
know, so no, that it. Any chance? Do you look at Achan and Mostert and go, yeah, that's going to fade this year. Someone's going to be able to come up with something to stop them on
Well,
a level, or do you look at it as more of a even if they stop them to an extent, it's still going to be a very productive ground game this year?
this week is the week I'm very intrigued with. And I know the Bills and Dolphins just from a like big pictures like divisional rivalry and all that type of stuff, but the Bills run their nickel package on 100% of snaps against 21 personnel. Mike McDaniel knows this. He knew it last year. And we saw in the Bills snow game that Raheem Mostert just was trucking. They were going. So Atron getting the game that he had in the moment, like needing that right now, because it kind of shows like, okay, we have a new weapon we can use. Especially they scored 70 without Jalen Waddle, which is still mind-boggling.
Yeah,
In this game, they're going to run 21, I feel like, a lot with Ingold. And honestly, they might even run it with Moser and Atron on the field because Atron can just play like a slot receiver, like a Darren Sproles-esque dude. And you talk about jet motion, they might not need to use Tyreek Hill on all those. Like, he can
yeah,
do a lot of the stuff from like a speed perspective that terrifies. Like, they can go and have him motion from the slot to take like the jet pass as Mostert just comes underneath and they pull everybody to the other side of the field. And Taylor Rapp is the weak side linebacker right now for the Bills when they go C-21. I think Mike McDaniel's just going to go at that
yeah.
because as always, best defense against a great quarterback like Josh Allen is keeping him off the field and making him feel pressure to score points because then he turns the ball over.
Yeah, and then he goes haywire like he's Ricky Bobby,
Yep.
he has a little bit of that in him. That's for
Yep.
sure. Do you what was I going to ask you about with this? It's what's mind-boggling to me too was when you said Jalen Waddle was missing, and when you think about the fact that they still have, you know, they still had four players who would be the fastest player on a lot of teams. When you add Chosen Anderson to the mix, who was off the practice squad, and then they
Yep.
put him back on the practice squad, they literally have five players who people would say that's our speed guy on our team,
Yep.
and people don't realize how much of a multiplier. Well, they are now. You look at the Dolphins, you see how much of a multiplier it is to have that much speed on a team if it's used in a manner to threaten the rules of a defense. And you explained that so well. I mean,
It's it's what I do. I mean, I Robbie Chosen. I know
yeah,
he's changed his name so many times. It's cool for him though. Just like a little side story. Like he grew up down here in South Florida. That's where I am. He played at Plantation High School. So he's expressed to Mike McDaniel like after Mike McDaniel informed him like, hey, like you're gonna be waived by us because you just didn't cut it out. He asked to stay on the practice squad. Like Robbie Chosen at his point in his career, like obviously he's not a guy that's going to be a huge difference maker for teams, but he wanted to stay home. And Mike McDaniel talked about like him working hard and kind of being the guy that wants respect and having him score the touchdown in the game from even Mike White, who's another South Florida kid. He played
Yeah.
at U School down here. I watched him actually when I was in high school. So watching them two connect in the first home game for Miami was pretty cool to see.
That's a pretty cool story. I had
Yeah.
no idea about that. That's awesome. So let's talk about some offenses since we're on the ground game. In addition
Yep.
to Miami, who are some offenses where you'd invest in the running back depth chart if you're playing like dynasty or regular season with larger rosters? Because a lot of my listeners are kind of like the diehard large roster, 40 roster, IDP kind of guys. They're looking for depth.
Okay.
So where are offenses that you're like, you know what, we're off to a bad start with the running backs, guys are getting hurt, or I had J.K. Dobbins, I had Nick Chubb, I had
Hmm.
Jonathan Taylor, and now I'm like perpetually looking for a opportunity where that a bat could hit. And so I thought what I recommended to people this week at Football Guys was here are three teams that I think you should just at the end of your roster just be rotating these guys when you have the luxury to have them on your roster just in case an injury happens because the offensive line's playing well. They seem to be scheming well against good defenses and figuring out how to stay away from the disruptive characters like say Arizona against Dallas, how they were able to stay away from Micah Parsons and
Yeah.
neutralize him and get guys to and where I think they have talent on the depth chart to where James Conner doesn't work out. I like Keontae Ingram enough to feel like paired with that offense and with enough carries, he could be serviceable for you in a manner where they might be able to do some decent work, especially with the way they're employing their scheme. So that was one that I would recommend. But are there teams like that come to mind for you where you would go, yeah, I'm interested in. I'd be interested in this backfield. And I picked Miami because like I
Yeah.
after Achan and Mostert, I still like Chris Brooks, and he
Yeah.
may still be behind Salvin Ahmed, but still,
Yeah.
you could see whoever it is, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. As long as they have Tua, Tyreek Hill, I don't even
Yeah.
know what I say if they need Teron Armstead because they block really well without him right now, which is
That's
like
just
he
crazy.
played this past weekend, which is the 70-point performance, but they looked really good blocking against New England and the Chargers, which was very impressive to me. But one player that came to mind just from again, he hasn't been great. He had the draft capital invested. Obviously, we know how it panned out, but Trey Sermon, right now he's the backup in Indy. We know Jonathan Taylor is most likely going to either like doesn't want to be there as of right now. And you saw that Colts run game with Zach Moss run extremely well against Baltimore. For me, Shane Steichen as a play caller, am very impressed with the way that he's able to what he's done in just one season so far with them, being the record they have and running against Baltimore was just something I did not expect. I knew Zach Moss was going to get a lot of touches, and obviously right now he got 100%, like 90% of them or something crazy. So I would go with them, and then I mean, you can never go wrong with San Fran. Like
Yeah.
you add those guys, and if for whatever reason they need to rest McCaffrey because they seem to just not care about the whole rest thing with him. They keep talking about it. I don't know if anybody is going to sell Elijah Mitchell, but if you can buy into it, I just would because the middle portion of the season he's gonna have to get rest. He can't keep at the pace he is. As a Panthers fan, I love McCaffrey. He's gonna want to do that. Like
Yeah.
that's what he wants to be, but Shanahan's gonna have to pull him back just a little bit. And then I'd say Seattle. I think we've seen him throughout the years. I know Kenneth Walker just had a huge game against the Carolina Panthers, but I think right now they're playing a ton of 12, which is something I want for my running backs, especially when you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett.
Yeah.
And the run game's going to get going with Gino. Gino doesn't want to sit back and throw the ball 40 times a game. He just wants to win, and run game will be a big reason why.
So I just want to make a little statement here. I did not pay Jordan to say Trey Sermon, so if I don't know if you know, but like I had Trey Sermon rated as my number one back in that year that he was there. I was a big Trey Sermon fan. So the joke, I get a lot of people who ask me, they're like, "Are you know, what do you think of Trey Sermon here? What do you think about him in these places? You know, as he's going here?" And I'm like, "Listen, just wait and see. That's all I can tell you. Don't
Yeah.
you know, don't jump the gun or anything." But what is it about? What is about the Colts run game with Sermon? Because I know would probably want to know who listen to this. What is, from your standpoint, why'd you choose him, and why with that Colts run game?
Well, they added him and then they elevated him immediately, which is not something you see often. Zach Moss isn't a guy that I'm expecting to take the workload that he has been. And when you watch their game against Baltimore doesn't let you run. They've just historically been able to shut down the run game. They have Roquan and Patrick Queen. Obviously, their up front guys aren't as good as years past, but they're still formidable. And then you saw Shane Steichen be able to kind of get it going with Zach Moss. And it was, yeah, Zach Moss broke some tackles, but the offense is kind of built that way where we have Quentin Nelson on it. Like the Colts still have pieces on their offensive line that can do some damage in the run game. And for me, with Trey Sermon, it's kind of like, so Anthony Richardson comes back. Anthony Richardson obviously is going to run, but he's also a threat to run. Like this could be a Gus Edwards situation where he's not getting 25 carries in a game, but in a deep league where you need guys on your roster for certain weeks, I could see Trey Sermon having or being effective in this scheme because of the threat of Anthony Richardson, because of the way that they can kind of get going offensively, and elevating him after just claiming him and kind of Jake Funk just being like, "You're to the backseat, buddy." I think there's a good chance that we see him see more touches in this upcoming week because they're going to want to lessen the workload on
Yeah,
Zach Moss.
that makes sense. And I would probably, I'll add Washington to that mix, and I that's it's you know, I look at it this way. I don't think Antonio Gibson is like the greatest running back alive by any stretch of the imagination, but we've seen what he can do with enough touches and dedicated touches. I like what Brian Robinson has done. You can see he's got good feet. He opens his hips well. He can make sudden changes of direction. So and he's very good at pressing deep into the line and getting out. And the line seems healthy enough that and with what they do in the screen game and what Bieniemy's doing right now, I feel like that there's enough there that they're playing two tight ends. They can get heavy when they want to. They can and so I've kind of liked what I've seen. I liked what he did against Buffalo. I think that if Howell, Howell just underestimated linebacker drops in some situations, had a really rough game. But overall, this year he's played reasonably well. They've made simple solutions for him to be able to, they put like 3-on-2, they flood zones, and then like he's like able to not having to do a lot of manipulation across the field. But when that happens, he stands in tough in the pocket and makes the throws. So I think that this team is going to be able to stay in it enough with this offensive line that they're good enough that I like Brian Robinson. You're probably not going to be able to get Brian Robinson, Achane, Mostert, McCaffrey, all the guys we talked about. But if you're just hoping for a chance, and not that you're rooting for injury, but you're just hoping for an opportunity, I think that's another way of looking at it. Some might go, well, it's the same thing, but I choose to look at it from an optimistic side, just saying, life happens, and you got to be prepared for the potential. Just keep taking guys from these teams, and then at some point maybe you're able to, or just be monitoring them, and then at that point you're going to be able to get some guys maybe cheaply who, if you can stay in the thick of it, for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, and you get one of these guys in the right situation, you might end up with a running back who helps your team really just gel together at the exact right time. So, yeah. So let's get to rookies. Who are, you're a big college football guy. So who's encouraged you thus far this season from what you've seen of their play?
So to take an easy answer, first round pick, Jordan Addison. I was in love with him when he came out of college, and he's showing everything that I thought he was, where these post like double move corner type concepts, he doesn't lose speed. He gets in and out of his break really well, and he tracks the football really well down the field. Obviously, he's not seeing a ton of snap share. Well, because Quezzy and Minnesota right now are trying to get 12 personnel in the field, similar to what the 49ers and Miami do. They didn't bring in the fullback, they brought in Josh Oliver to protect Kirk Cousins, and then let Justin Jefferson and eventually Jordan Addison be the two main receivers on the field and let them exploit teams down the field. So for me, Addison, as of right now, everything I saw from him in college is everything I'm seeing from him in the pros. He's never going to be a guy that's going to command, 14 targets in a game. However, he's someone that can get it done down the field. He can get it done on the sidelines. He's kind of built similarly to like Calvin Ridley, Stephon Diggs, and Devonta Smith. Not quite as technician of a route runner as those guys are in today's NFL, but he's got room to develop in that way. I know his weight and his 40 time were a big concern for everybody. However, he's caught 2 or 3 40-yard touchdowns this year. It seems like he gets a play every single week because he is just beating these safeties inside. He is setting guys up and out leveraging them and just making the big play down the field. That's one of my main guys. I don't know your thoughts on him.
I'm thrilled with him. I think that he's exactly what you would expect him to be. I compared him to somewhere between like his aspirational players were a mix of Devonta and T.Y. Hilton. And when you think about T.Y., I mean, he was a rugged, sturdy player for his size. I mean, they put him outside a lot, and he figured out a way to manage that in time. And as his career went along, he got banged up, but like you could see that he was versatile enough. And I think Addison has that opportunity to grow in that direction. And the best corners in the NFL. Some of them didn't. Or veteran cornerbacks. I saw the Eagles game, and he didn't. There was a couple of plays where I saw they didn't bite on the double move, early. But like you said, he's won on them in the NFL already. So you're seeing. I think he's a heady receiver who's only going to get better.
Yeah.
I don't have really much to add with you about him. I'd say that a guy that's probably impressed me early on. I was a big Sam Laporta fan. And I'll say Kincaid and Laporta. I'm a big fan of both those guys. And while Kincaid, I've joked, looks like he's like those dime store like plastic ponies that kids put the slot on and ride, and they're using a thoroughbred like this, like ride a pony out in front of the drugstore. Right now, I think that's just based on the coverages that you're seeing, on some of the things that they wanted. What they're trying to do offensively, I think they'll expand it a little bit more, where Kincaid will get some of these seam routes and fades and things that he's great at. But when you watch him on these short routes, even if he only gains 2 yards or 3 yards, he's breaking a tackle and making someone miss on just about every catch. And so, to me, the athletic ability is translating just fine. It's just the usage isn't there yet, and I think it's going to happen. And with Laporta is exactly what I thought he was, which is a guy who you can put outside and have run some in-breaking and out-breaking routes against safeties or corners if you need to, but they're going to put a linebacker out there and follow him, and he's going to be an absolute mismatch there. And you saw I don't know the name of the play, but you see the 49ers do it, you see the Bears do it, you've seen a number of teams do it, where basically it's a play action rollout to one side, the tight end looks like he's going the sail route and gets the safety to basically bite on the sail, and then he breaks across the field on a deep over, and it's a long touchdown. And that's what we had with Laporta and Jared Goff. So I was encouraged that they're using Laporta the way they said they were all summer long, and I think that the fact that he's a top 3 tight end right now, while I'm pleasantly surprised just because I'm pessimistic that they're going to use guys like that, ability-wise, I'm not surprised at all.
No, this tight end class was very, very talented, and they all kind of went to the spots that needed, I felt like, for that development. I was a little worried with Laporta being in Detroit, but then Jamison Williams being suspended, when he got suspended, it's kind of like, well, he's going to have to be a big part of this offense early on. And once you're a part of it, you're just going to stay that way for the rest of it, because once Goff trusts you, then you're good. And right now, I think tonight he's probably in for a big game against the Green Bay Packers, because they sit in a lot of cover 3, cover 4.
Yeah.
Devondre Campbell being out, he's one of the better coverage linebackers in football. Like, I like Quay Walker a lot. I think Quay Walker's a very athletic and talented player. I think the eye candy can get him, and Sam Laporta can get behind him, and they're going to see some big plays from him tonight. But another rookie that kind of made me encourage me, I guess, is someone that I've touted for quite some time, and obviously he just had the blow up game. But Tank Dell, Tank Dell was a guy that I saw at the Senior Bowl. When he was at the Senior Bowl, he makes everything look the same off the line of scrimmage. And what I mean by that is when people try to press him, he comes at you the same way, and he can break in every direction. And it worked at the Senior Bowl at a high level, and I was like, wow, he's 60 or 68 pounds or whatever the nonsense was. He's not going to be able to get it done. And I was like, okay, maybe 168 pounds might not, bring the draft capital. But then he got drafted in the third round. And then you heard that CJ Stroud was a part of that pick. And it's like, so you're telling me they looked past his weight nonsense. And then the quarterback they drafted in the first round was all in on picking him, because he guessed they threw together. And then you saw a lot of the camp highlights from throughout the preseason. I was very into it. Obviously, he blew up in the first game. Then he obviously didn't play because Noah Brown was starting over him for whatever reason. Bobby Slowick decided to go that route. But now that he's on the field, he's not coming off. And Bobby Slowick has adapted a lot of what Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel probably helped teach him, in that sense of yak creators. Tank Dell is a separator, and he is getting the ball in space. And right now, CJ Stroud is just one of the smoother passers that I've seen from a rookie. He looks comfortable. He looks calm. It's like, bad snap, doesn't matter. I'll pick it up. I'll relax. I'll find my guy, find my read. And just Tank Dell using his hips, getting in and out of breaks. There was a play he made against the Colts where he ran a deep out. And by the third step of him turning the corner on that out route, the corner still hadn't flipped his hips to cover the out. Yeah. And it was just a beautiful, he's catching it 20 yards down the field. I don't really have a Tank Dell comp at this point. He's just one of a kind with his speed, his in and out of breaks. And now he's got a quarterback that trusts him, and they can't run the ball right now. So they're going to throw the ball 25, 30 times a game. And him and Nico Collins are probably going to be the main targets. Robert Woods has played exceptionally well. We all know his age. We all know that he's not going to continue that. But Tank Dell, for me, has been one that stood out as a guy that I was in on. I think he's one of my highest drafted receivers in best ball, which is nice.
Yeah, and, when you watched him, you could tell that he was a very accomplished route runner who could tell a story in a very efficient and explosive way. The only question I had with him about his game, early, would be, he did everything great up until the catch point, and then that's where he had some inconsistencies with attack and positioning. But you could see him positioning against guys and playing big boy outside receiver ball in those situations too, and having success with it. So you knew it wasn't like he couldn't do it. It was just that he didn't always do it consistently well. And so in open field, him, Zay Flowers, and Tyjae Spears were the best open field players, I think, in this draft class, if you ask me. They were, in my opinion. And Spears, I've talked a lot about him on shows on this channel, and if you haven't heard it, I'll just put it this way. When a coach like Mike Vrabel, who doesn't praise any rookies, decides in game 1 against the New Orleans Saints in the Superdome, where it's deafening, says, you know what? We're going to use you in pass protection, and you're going to be picking up twisting defensive tackles, and you're going to win those interactions repeatedly and look like a 5-year veteran doing it. I was blown away, because I knew he could catch. I knew he could run, but I didn't know he was going to be that steady as a pass protector. I'm over the moon about Tyjae Spears, even though people are worried about the knees, but I'm like, he's a Coper, and Coper's, he's kind of an exceptional circumstance, I would say. And I think he's going to end up being the man or the lead man by the end of the year. Um, if this doesn't work, if they can't stay competitive, and the Titans are kind of an up and down team, like they
Yep.
can, they match up well with certain teams, and the teams that don't play consistently strong football, they can be competitive and win. The best defenses, they face really strong defenses. They're trash right now. I mean, you saw what the Browns were able to do with their
Yeah.
defense. That but then against the Chargers,
Yeah.
different story. Or same Saints with an aided noise factor. That there was so you kind of see that. But what a guy that's kind of under the radar that I've been like enjoying seeing is Dontavian Wicks, the UVA kid with the Packers. He's
I I have a story about this one.
good because Drew Lieberman is like a friend of the show, and I've had him on a couple times, and he's coached wide receivers and tight ends, guys like Evan Ingram before his contract year in Jayville to get him like help him with his hands a little bit, and he's worked with guys like Edelman and Mohamed Sanu and a bunch of and one of his Olamide Zacchaeus is one of his guys. He's always been kind of a low key favorite of mine, and Wicks. And he told me about Wicks. He asked me about what I had for Wicks, and I said, I see him as a guy that could develop down the line. There's just some things that works out. But you watch him in the preseason, and you can see what he did well. He did very well. Like
Yep.
the things he knew, and you could tell he could handle the physicality of the game extraordinarily well, and he seemed to play with a lot of confidence. And it just seems like he keeps finding his way with Christian Watson out to be able to make some plays, And I think Jordan Love's taken a shine to him a bit in terms of trusting him to be able to do what he needs to do well in the right situation. So, what's your story on Wicks?
So the 2021 Wicks year was the year that I was like, this guy could be a day two pick, like a late day two pick. And then 2022 season came along and they changed offenses from who they had to a Clemson offensive coordinator. Their offense could not have been put together any worse than what it was in that season. It was pitiful. Like
Yeah,
Brandon Armstrong the year prior threw for like 4,400 yards. I don't think he hit 3K. And it's
yeah,
like that's just a product of just not putting together the right offense. And in 2021, 67% of his throws came or yards came on 15 air yards or more. When you watch this guy down the field, I think that's just what I love about receivers. When you can win down the field, it's special to me. Wicks was one of those guys. And he's not the combine, he had the hurt hip. And during the Senior Bowl, like I saw someone that was just making corners miss, frankly. And he was running. There's a whip route he ran on Jamie Robinson, who's a safety. Still, you get matchups with safety sometimes as corners. He put him like two shoes, like just on the ground and wide open, caught a touchdown. Throughout the whole Senior Bowl process, I was very impressed with him. And then obviously the draft capital and everything kind of came out. I was going to be writing about him until that transpired, but for the Senior Bowl, I did write about him, did say those things. So for Wicks, I'm so happy to see it. I
yeah.
think that right now I don't think he's that far off Romeo Doubs. Like I don't see Romeo Doubs as this much better than him. I think Christian Watson's the player in this receiving room that's the top dog. I think Jaden Reed is going to be the second guy.
Yeah.
But that third spot between Wicks and Doubs is going to be a very, very interesting story because I think Wicks, from a prospect standpoint, was better than Doubs coming out of college,
I
just
would
because
agree.
Dubes couldn't fight off press coverage really well. He struggles with that in the NFL today still. And Wicks was a guy that like that 2021 year, if you just focus on that season, you just forget 2022 ever happened. I promise you'll be very, very impressed with him. I'm impressed with him. I hope tonight he keeps pace with Dubes because I know Watson's back and I think he's going to play like 70% of the snaps at least because they
Yeah.
kept him out for a while to do it. But Wicks is a guy that down the field, I'm very excited. Last one I'll mention for me and the rookies, Josh Downs. He hasn't produced yet, has not put up big numbers. I see a guy that gets open frequently, and talking about a dude who makes people miss. There was a route he ran against the Texans, I think, on his 27-yard catch that Anthony Richard peppered him with. He had the corner or the slot corner on his knees to the right as he broke inside. He's someone that he's a better. It's tough to say like Isaiah McKenzie because Isaiah McKenzie was a little bit more raw coming out. Like Josh Downs is going to be a 7 to 10 year slot player.
Like
Similar to like
maybe a like more athletic Sterling Shepard.
yes, maybe like I mean more athletic Cole Beasley. Like
There you go.
he can get in and out. Again, there's the deep side of football that I really like, but then there's Josh Downs who just he's going to get open between 4 to 12 yards down the field at a high rate. And you want to talk about developing Anthony Richardson, that's a dude that's going to help a lot with
Yes.
his development. It's just going to be about getting on the same page, knowing how to sit in these soft zones, and Josh Downs can do some things after the catch, even at his size. So for me, those were the three rookies that I had as very impressive, and I can't wait till they have that big game because I touted him last week. He didn't put up big numbers against the Ravens. It was a little bit rainy, and Minshew didn't just pepper him. But I think this upcoming few weeks, he's going to have one of those games where he gets over 100.
No, I love it, and I love the thoughts on Green Bay because rarely does anybody see eye to eye with me about Romeo Dubes. Is that I just saw him as a guy that again he was everything between like the mid stem up
Yep.
until the ball arrives looks good, and then it's that he's gotten better with positioning his hands and positioning his body. You can see him improving there, but it wasn't a naturally good thing for him. It was actually a struggle for him at Nevada to like make the right positioning. The guy who won those plays was Cole Turner. He was
Yep.
that guy that that Carson Strong trusted in that respect. Whereas Dubs, you would be like, he's open enough. If I can get it to him and he doesn't have to fight for it, we're gonna be okay. And then the throw might have been oops, like you're gonna have to fight
Yeah.
for it. But like Wicks was the exact opposite. Wicks,
Yep.
you knew if it's anywhere near him, he was getting it. And what was impressive to me is in the preseason watching some of these slants that he ran or crossers or any type of route over the middle, his ability to just play physical, get downhill, and make somebody miss or break a tackle. You're just looking at him and going, he doesn't have to be combine fast.
No.
This guy's going to make plays. So who are players you think have the talent to produce? Kind of like Downs, more guys like Downs, but they don't have to be rookies. Like you think they have the talent to produce, but the environment just isn't there for it to happen for them this year.
Yeah, I mean, the main guy is it's a rookie. It's someone that was drafted highly, but JSN, like it's just not right now without the left tackle and right tackle. You see Seattle play 12. And when they're going to play 12, when you look who your two receivers are going to throw out there between Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN, it's Metcalf and Lockett. JSN right now just doesn't have a role in this offense, and it sucks because it's going to be criticized for your first rookie taken. You got a first round draft pick. That means you're supposed to play all these snaps, and all these other rookies are playing extremely well. But for me right now, it's like this guy. It's not his fault. He's not on the field because
Yeah.
he's playing behind two very, very good players, and in a situation where I think if they had their left tackle and right tackle, they'd be running a lot more 11.
That's and then thank you for that because it's the contention I've always had since they drafted him. So he's going to be the most productive receiver in this class as a rookie if they play because they. You look at the story. Shane Waldron comes over from the Rams, who play
Yep.
a lot of 11 personnel. They got their Cooper Cup. They were hoping to get a Cooper Cup esque type of player in D. Eskridge when they
Yep.
first drafted him in the second round, who
Yep.
speedster can very physical in the run game, someone who really didn't get hurt all that often if I recall, but couldn't stay healthy, and they pretty much gave up on him as like being the future, probably because there's other things that we don't know about if that's happened. So now they go back to the well, and people are like, well, that doesn't make any sense. They play all these two tight end, they play personnel all this X
Yeah.
percentage of the time. And I'm going, they had to. D. Eskridge was their second round pick. They were expecting him to be on the field. It didn't work out. So they had to go with their tight ends. Well, they praised the tight ends this summer. Well, if you're a coach, are you going to say, we really didn't want to use Will Dissly and Colby Parkinson? We didn't want to use them, but we had to. Is that what Pete Carroll's really going to say to the media? Come on, folks. He's he's managing people. He wants these guys to feel like they're going to be a part of the game in any given week, and that he can get their best from them and not make them feel like that they're trash and don't want them there, because coaches understand that it's more than fantasy football out there. These guys have opportunities to contribute and they value them. But you're right. It's the same thing all over again. It's like they're cursed to not be able to put out the offense they actually want to run right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So I would, just JSN folks, if you have them in Dynasty, if you keep him, if somebody wants to give him up, take him. He's a dented can right now in that respect. So, okay. What about, let's see, anybody else on that list for you that you would say?
I mean, a player that, again, I don't think it happens for this year. I didn't mean to put two rookies, but the other rookie that I have right now is Quentin Johnston. He was never going to be a guy that I expected to be good in year one.
Yeah.
He had a lot of refining to do, and now he's going to get elevated into this role because people think that, well, Mike Williams is out. It's going to be him. Someone has to replace Mike Williams. No, that's not how the receiver position works. He can be on the field all he wants to be. Josh Palmer is going to be on the field more than him if you look at the two. And I actually think that from an offensive standpoint, it's Gerald Everett that you see get more usage than Quentin Johnston. So he's got the part. He's got everything you like athletically. His contested catches are pretty poor. His body catching is pretty tough to be a part of. But for me, he's the other guy that I'm like, I don't even see it happening, even with Mike Williams being out.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. I mean, and I think that the attack that he has is just all over the place. It's like the Ricky Bobby, I don't know how to use my hands thing. What do I do with them? And that's got to get better. But Everett, so good after the catch, and going to be relied upon a little bit more. So that makes total sense to me. When I think of players that, maybe their time is coming. I mean, I think that Zach Evans is a player who, has the talent.
Yep.
The question is he mature? Is he mature enough? Because the issues, I wondered if the issues were about high school and people just hung on to the fact that he got basically suspended from his high school championship game for not giving his cell phone over to his coach per policy, and the whole quixotic recruiting tale, and he couldn't decide. Well, his parents weren't really in an emotional or maturity place to be able to help him. The guy who was the patriarch of his family was his grandfather, who passed away a year before he got all those serious, it was really serious recruiting time. So I think he handled it all himself. He was a good student wherever he was. I mean, like, he was, I believe he was like all academic, first year at TCU. So he's a smart kid. Maybe there's some maturity stuff there. Maybe some of the maturity, maybe if Cam Akers and the maturity issues, or the issues with like being accountable and doing what he was supposed to do with McVay, if that was true, I don't know. We don't know whether it's true or not, or if you do, something, I don't know, it's a different story. But from what I would know, what I don't know, I have to assume it could be either side of the equation. It could be the people who I've heard whispers that say, McVay's a great mind. He's a great coach in terms of X's and O's and scheme. But he also oftentimes is the smartest man in the room and wants everybody to know about it and has all the answers. And even when he doesn't have all the answers, he can be kind of stubborn about the answers that he has. And maybe his communication wasn't great. Maybe they just didn't communicate well together. I try to look at either side of the story. What I'm looking at is that, Evans has been inactive all
Yeah.
year. So, and from a pure film talent standpoint, I think he's the best running back on the roster now with Akers gone. But Kyron Williams doesn't make a lot of mistakes compared to everybody else. He's a low mistake player relative to what they have on the roster. But at some point, it's either sink or swim for Evans. And I
Yeah.
think that he's a guy that next year, if he doesn't have a significant hand in the running game, then the answer is probably that he was either not a favorite of McVay's, and we learned down the line that McVay played favorites in a way that was a little bit, that sometimes skipped over players who were talented, or that he wasn't a favorite because he wasn't a professional at the level that he needs to be. But he's a guy that I would stay patient with at the cost that you can get him or where you can acquire him.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, Zach Evans, his Ole Miss, it kind of sucked that they just got Quinshon Judkins, who's just
Yeah,
he was NFL ready as a freshman, so he had a tough sled. I mean, when he was on the field and got the ball in Ole Miss, he was very productive.
yeah.
Lane Kiffin gets it. Lane Kiffin's very focused on getting whoever his best player is the ball, and him and Quinshon Judkins were that. This past year, they were a very run heavy team, and now this year they're actually a little bit more balanced with Jackson Dart back there. So I do agree that Zach Evans is a guy that he is more talented than Kyron Williams, but it's about is he being more coachable than him? Is he being someone that's bought into what he's being asked to do, even if he doesn't want to do it? Sometimes that gets the best of athletes.
And then a guy that's probably, I would just keep an eye on. You don't probably have to have him on your roster, but I love that Xavier Hutchinson is playing special teams at the level that he is, and that he's embraced that role on the team. And I think that he has an opportunity to grow because Robert Woods, like you said, isn't going to be around forever. They're trying to get John Mechie into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
They already have, but the question is, you have your ultra explosive guy, you've got your guy in Collins who is explosive enough to win downfield, but he's really more of an in cut type of big player, or using his size to win on fades and sail routes and things like that on the perimeter. And Hutchinson, is he that guy that can be that third option for that team? Does he fit into that mix? I don't know, but I think he's the type of player that even if he doesn't have a long-term career in Houston, that he might wind up somewhere else where he plays himself into the favor of coaches, and continues to grow his game, because I think he has the right attitude for being a professional. And by year 3, year 4, we look at him and go, maybe he's what some people thought Noah Brown could develop into, which is a starter and grow into a starter. Where Brown was like, he's a nice reserve who can do a lot of things for you, but that's
Yeah,
his ceiling.
yeah, that makes sense. Xavier Hutchinson was someone I also got to meet and talk to at the Senior Bowl. He was definitely a professional and also just a good dude. I think last year of Iowa State, he was just like, "Hey, we lost Brees Hall to the draft. It's your turn," and he just took on the role of like, "I'll get targeted 17 times a game. I will catch 16 of them. I will carry this offense no matter where you're placing it, and just they can double me, triple me. It doesn't really matter. It's the Big 12 defenses are little little not
Yeah,
capable of defending some of that type of stuff, but he dominated his last year in college too.
yeah, without a doubt. So, how about guys who you think are fantasy options, this year or will be this year, that you just feel like were written off too early?
To start, it's a player that's playing a full-time role, and it's a player that is maybe a one-trick pony in a sense, but that's fine. I think that can still be viable depending on how deep your league is, and it's Alec Pierce. Like, Minshew is not going to be the guy that fits well with him. That doesn't that those two don't, I feel like, correlate. But Anthony Richardson and him, it's the target's going to be there. Like it, Anthony Richardson can throw a football 70 yards, and Alec Pierce is their guy to do that type of stuff. It was not there in Week 1 against Jacksonville, first game. It's Anthony Richardson's first start, and then they were boat racing Houston early on in that game where Anthony Richardson was just running and getting cool plays designed for him. So Alec Pierce is running 90% of the routes, I believe, and just someone that he's on the field. Eventually, the production's going to come, and it's going to come from down the field. It's going to be similar to like a Gabe Davis, where he gets 70 targets this year, 40 of them get caught, and they're for 500, 600 yards, and he scores 5 touchdowns. You're like, how did he catch a big touchdown this week? And it's like, well, because Anthony Richardson was able to have time processed, and it was man coverage, and he launched the ball 60 yards.
Yeah, I think a guy that I'll probably say it's becoming a little more obvious this after this week, and it's not one that I love to recommend, but I'll say Deshaun Watson. I think that after the first couple of games, it looked rough. I think the Nick Chubb injury has basically allowed um, afforded Watson a real second chance because now all that lobbying to Kevin Stefanski to say spread the field, let me do what I do well, and Stefanski's like, I like to compress the field, I like to run the ball, I want to do all these things. Now it's kind of like, well, it's going to run through you. I like Jerome Ford, I like Kareem Hunt as football players, but in terms of like where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck is spreading the offense out, and you can still. They did some inventive things with the screen game,
Yeah.
last week. They're going to be able to do a lot of the Stefanski-esque stuff that they do with that. But I think you're going to see this be Deshaun Watson's offense 100%, and as a result, he's probably going to end up producing at a reasonably high level. Is he going to get back to his Houston Texans days? I'm not quite sure about that, but I think that he will be a quarterback one in most leagues, maybe even a 10-team league. He still may be, a low end quarterback one. So, I like I like the matchup of what the scheme's going to be with who the player is.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, he's someone that he runs. He's also really willing to run right now, which is just going to give you easy fantasy points, and that's the key to having that big year. I think one other player that I'll mention for fantasy options written off too early is he plays with a quarterback that runs, but right now they can't do anything because the offensive line is just the worst in the NFL. Darren Waller. I was big on Darren Waller. I still think his role is perfect for what I want in my tight end. I think he's going to dominate targets as the season progresses. It's just going to be about just having any sort of offensive line and not playing the Dallas Cowboys or the 49ers. The Giants this past week, I think Daniel Jones has been pressured in under 2 seconds on like 27 dropbacks this year, which is twice more than any other quarterback in the NFL. Daniel Jones isn't playing well. He's no quarterback would be with the offensive line that they've had and the defensive lines that they've gone up against. But once they get some time in the pocket, once Andrew Thomas comes back, they'll be able to get some things going. And I think Darren Waller is going to be a big piece of that. And he was one of my favorite tight ends coming into the year and still is as we speak.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. What do you think about, just out of curiosity, what do you think about Brandon Ayuk this year? Now that we saw
Yeah.
all this was trending, but that shoulder looked pretty rough. You know, do you
Mhm.
think that he? Do you think are you still enthusiastic about him, or are you worried about the shoulder?
I'm worried about the shoulder just because it's like an extension thing. Like he's a guy that like Purdy doesn't put the ball at your chest. Purdy puts it for you to make a play, and like extending his arm to make a grab is going to be scary. Receivers with shoulders have always been a fear of mine, just from that perspective. And Ayuk, someone that like he'll go up and get it, and like that's what he wants to do. That's how I think one of his touchdowns was all about it. From like a getting open perspective, I think Ayuk's gonna have no issues doing that. I think he still is the number one receiver there, but we're also seeing Debo Samuel be healthy, be skinny, be the electric, explosive player that he still is. Like everybody is very into this idea that like just because he has to break tackles makes him a bad receiver. It's like, no, teams play zone, teams give him some space, and when they do,
Yeah.
he just catches it and bulldozes three other people. So the 49ers are going to be tough throughout the whole season because they can beat you in whatever they want. but for Ayuk specifically, that shoulder scares me from a reaching out like
Yeah,
over the top catches. I hope he
me
gets held
too.
out until he's 100 or as close to 100% as he's going to get this year.
I hope he does too, and I also hope Ronnie Bell gets a little more playing time as a
Yeah.
result of that, because I like what I saw of him in the preseason, and I'd like to see him get a little game experience just to help him develop a little bit more long term, because there's something there that I
Yeah.
think that can be farmed. Um, Jared Goff, do you think he's earning a long term gig in Detroit, or do you think this is more of he's still more of a just a bridge until they find a better opportunity to draft a high end quarterback?
He's definitely a bridge until they can find that high end quarterback. He allows every weapon to grow. That's the big thing that Goff has over a lot of these other like veteran quarterbacks that were turnstile like situations. Like Amon-Ra, his development is just increased because Jared Goff. Like Jameson Williams' development, I think, is the only one that I'm concerned about just from the standpoint of Goff just not being the down the field passer that he should be for Jameson Williams. But as far as like long term gig, he's going to keep them out of contention for those top picks at the quarterback position. However, he is someone that I think kind of gets like the similar situation he had with the Rams. They're going to win games with him. He's not going to put you in the top 10, but he's also probably not putting you at 32. He's a situation where it could go the way of San Fran, where they don't ever really replace him. They buy up into the quarterback and he just beats them out. Or it could go the situation where the Rams, where they make the move for the quarterback was clearly the guy to kind of
Yeah.
take it over the top. But Dan Campbell loves him, so I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. I just don't believe that if there's an opportunity to get a quarterback that they love, especially in this upcoming draft class where might be 5 to 7 quarterbacks that I think could be argued in the first round. Obviously, that's going to mean some guys slip to the second round. And from a talent perspective, they already have Hendon Hooker that they're going to try to develop as a big project that I think could pay off with the offense that they're building.
Yeah. Hey, I look at I agree with Goff in the sense that like he's not the guy who you can get painted. You can paint him into a corner, and he's going to use his athletic ability and arm to create something that they tried to stop you from doing. But in terms of gaining more experience, being tough in the pocket, getting, I thought he was good at Cal at being able to discern the blitz and handle pressure. With the Rams, it just seemed like it was like he got. I wonder if he got told so much about what to do and how to do it and how everything was supposed to go that it was like, or on a need to know basis, that he was maybe on a need to know basis, that because the language that Campbell said was, we threw a lot at him, we just decided sink or swim with him, and if he
Yeah.
couldn't handle it, whatever, but he just kept showing he could handle it, which
Mm-hmm.
was the guy I thought I saw at Cal. And then with the Rams, it was almost like, that's why I'm a little critical of a guy like McVay, who's he's great, but at the same time, you wonder with that Shanahan influence management style of things, that you wonder if a little bit of it's like, well, this is what you need to know. You don't have to be
Yeah.
the do everything guy. They will kiss the behind of a do everything guy if they can get him. But if they get a guy that they're not sure about, I think they micromanage these guys to death sometimes. And I think that maybe McVay micromanaged Goff to the point that people just assumed he was a puppet.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, if they can find a guy who can throw them out of a corner, I think they'll take it. But if they can't, I think he's going to be there for a while.
That
So
makes sense.
yeah. So what about, before we go? Got two last questions. We got DFS matchups you like this week, because again, you're known as the You're the DFS guy at the 33rd team. You've
Yep.
had quite a story with that I've always enjoyed, because the DFS guys most of us know in daily fantasy are very numbers driven, and you're a film guy, and you're
Yep.
doing pretty damn well for yourself as a film guy. So just as a thought, who's a chalk play, who's a long shot that you would recommend to people this week?
So from a chalk's perspective, I think Chris Olave is a guy that I'm just going to go to. He was one of my favorite receivers coming into the year. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but he's had over 80 yards every single game. You look at this Tampa Bay defense, they've struggled against number one so far. You saw AJ Brown just get peppered. He had over 140. DJ Moore had 100 yards against them. And then in week one, obviously, Jay Jettas had over 150. And that was without the Vikings having the ball ever in the second half. The Saints, obviously, Derek Carr's out for a few weeks with an AC joint sprain. You had Jameis Winston come in. Last year, with Jameis Winston under center, Chris Olave was very, very good against single high coverages. Todd Bowles has implemented a little bit more too high this year, but he is a guy that does not want you to run, and I don't think he's going to let Alvin Kamara get going, and he's going to trust his DBs on the boundary. That's where Chris Olave comes in and is just going to be a menace towards them. They are also dealing with some injuries at the cornerback position right now. That is something that I'm monitoring with Carlton Davis and Jamal Dean. Those two guys, they can kind of create problems with Chris Olave because they're so physical. But Olave, as a rookie, was still managing over 60 or 70 yards a game against this Tampa Bay defense last year. And it's kind of like, I think he took a step up, which means the big play is going to be there on these guys that like to get their hands on you and try to keep you at the line of scrimmage. So Olave to me is the chalk play. And then the long shot, I have no idea why DraftKings keeps pricing Adam Thielen under 4,500. I need them to stop because I keep playing it. I keep playing him. He's he's one of my guys, a Carolina Panthers fan. It's not trying to be fandom based, but Brian Flores is just sending the house right now. He's just blitzing. The only team he didn't blitz, I don't know why, or blitz at a high enough rate, was the Eagles. Everybody else he's playing blitz, man coverage, single high, and his corners are playing 7-8 yards off the ball. So Adam Thielen is a guy that is going to catch a ton of passes. And then if you want the bigger long shot, because Thielen will probably be rostered pretty heavily, DJ Chark. We've seen Brian Flores' defenses give up the big play. Obviously, we saw Mike Williams do it last week. We saw Mike Evans do it. DJ Chark looked good with Andy Dalton under center. He's fully healthy now, running, I think, over like 80% of the routes. And against this scheme, only takes one play. And DJ Chark is a guy that doesn't need a lot of targets to pay off the 3,800 price tag, I think. It's just ridiculous that we're like Thielen is as low as he is. And, 150 yards last week. He had 80 and a touchdown the week prior. Like, what? Why? Why is he not 5K already? Like, what are we doing?
Ageism, I'm telling you, man, it's hilarious.
It's
I have him in a dynasty league with a bunch of other old receivers who seem to be still playing well, in Keenan Allen and Michael Thomas. And
Yep.
I did try to add DJ Chark in that league because somebody actually cut him in this 40-man roster league. It's and I was like, but I got outbid.
Dang.
So, but yeah, I was hoping for that myself. So, last question is, because you've got some football background. You obviously, just listening to you for this past hour and 5 minutes that we've done this, that I think people are going to understand that you have that football background. What's some advice to people that you could give about either how to learn the offensive game deeper, or to go deeper with learning defense? Just like you can pick any area of either side of the ball where, like, you would say this is a place to start and get better from there. Because I've always thought people are like, well, read this book, and learn all these books, and there's like all these books about coverages and all these different things. And I think some of the best advice I ever got one time was like, just start with looking at the center and the guard, what they do after the snap, and slowly expand your way out from there and gradually do that. So what's that for you?
For me, it's find something you love to watch. For me, center and guard was not where I started. It was the receiver in the corner in front of them. It was watching how, like, finding plays where a guy's in press coverage and seeing how a receiver responds to it. Seeing, just learning the game from that aspect, and then asking questions. Like, if anybody ever tagged me about a film question where they, record it on their phone, like, what is this? Why is this receiver doing this? Like, I'll respond. I can give my input. The amount of information that's out there is ridiculous. Like, you can get to anything you really want to learn just by going to YouTube and typing some things up. you have to vet some of that information. Let's be
Yeah.
very careful with who we're exactly buying into, but ask questions, find the position you love. It could be linebacker, it could be receiver and corner, it could be any specific area. Start with one, master one, and expand out. I am still learning about the run game. I am still learning about coverages and match coverage, and there's so much stuff that I believe I don't know, and never think you know everything there is to know, because football is an ever changing game, and we're seeing so many different like things that were put away for so many years come back into the thing. I
Yeah.
think the Colts ran wing T in week 1,
Yeah.
which is just absolutely awesome. Like I awesome to see at the NFL level.
That's great advice. And it's like, I think people don't realize how siloed football is. You know, there are people who are great at the X's and O's of scheme.
Yep.
Maybe there are people who are great at, the analytics of play decision making, or just looking at the data, from a variety of angles, or certain theories of things. There are people who are very good with you know, movement skills and techniques. And it can be broken out, siloed by position or
Yep.
groups of positions. And just because just because you can tell different coverages doesn't make you a great scout. Just
Yep.
because you're a decent scout doesn't mean that you can be a coach. There's a it's there's so much to learn with it. So that's why it's fun to be able to bring people on who have knowledge from different silos, and to be able to kind of highlight that and help you kind of learn the game. So Jordan, tell folks about where they can find you and what you have going on.
You can find me on Twitter at Jordan Vanek DFS. Obviously, you heard me talk film a lot, but the DFS is attached to the end of my Twitter or X name and handle. You'll see me post all my content there, as well as on the 33rdteam.com. We have a ton of great stuff out there. I do a weekly article where I review my lineups, whether they won or they lost, with Mark Garcia. This past week, I had a lineup that I played that, looking back, I built it during the crunch time of 12:50 to 1 p.m. And it was like, wow, all these players I like. I put this lineup together. Looking back on it, awful lineup, awful construction. I'm very upset with myself for playing it, but you lose money when you do things the wrong way. So I'm very open about my process. And when I do my weekly article for the main slate of tournaments, I break down my stacks, my mini stacks, everything from a coverage perspective that I'm seeing. You won't see that from any other DFS analyst that I personally know out there. So 33rdteam.com is where I'm at, and Twitter at Jordan Vanek DFS.
Love the transparency. That's awesome. And obviously, he knows ball. You can see that. You can find me at Matt Waldman. And if you can't find me there, I'm probably walking this dog who's trying to chew my chair off right now at the bottom of the screen that you can't see. But that's okay. We appreciate you listening, and we'll tune in. Tune in at another time, and hopefully, catch Jordan with what he's doing. And have a good week.